Hey everyone, welcome to the TDR Trade to Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend as we gear up for a big week in cannabis. It's earnings week. Biggest companies in the space going to be reporting their latest earnings, and we're going to dive into what we should be watching and why all week long as we give you the latest reports and what are important things that you to be mindful of. That's why it's important to listen to this podcast today. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Welcome in TDR lead financial writer and analyst, Benjamin A. Smith. Hope you had a good weekend, sir.
Very good weekend. Looking forward to earnings season.
Yes, as well. Anthony Varrell, millennial entrepreneur. Hope you had a good weekend as well. Should be an interesting week. Got a big week coming up, don't we, boys?
Yeah. No complaints. It's the first of the two major weeks for earnings, so it should be nice and slow for the next 2 weeks.
November is going to be a fun month, I think, for this space as we gear up for a busy time. So let's kick off our first intro and segment of this podcast, Into the Wire, outlining the biggest headlines in cannabis, psychedelics, and crypto. As I said off the top, it is earnings week and a big week coming up with the biggest companies, including TSND, who pre-announced their latest earnings about 2 weeks ago, if I'm correct, along with Ascend Wellness, TRUL, GTII, Canopy, all the notable names that are on deck, Anthony. So we begin with you. What would you say, or I guess there's some notable indicators you'll be paying attention close to this week as we start to see a lot of companies unveil their latest results?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to TSND that they didn't pre-announce their earnings, but they did revise guidance into year's end. I'm looking to see if they're tracking towards that once the actual numbers come out. Going into year's end, Ascend, they did pre-announce their earnings. So seeing how they come in line with that. TRUL, as far as their margins go, I'd like to see at least margin stabilization to margin expansion from them, and they might be able to achieve that with Maryland coming online with their 4 stores. GTI, I mean, I think it's going to be telling if their EBITDA is improving, as they're one of the stories that people do firmly believe that GTI can survive, and I do as well, with or without 280E, if we don't get some sort of government movement. And then Canopy. I mean, I'm curious to see what the rhetoric is and the languages coming out of Canopy. Biosteel has been jettisoned off. From what I've been told, that was a big part of the negative numbers attributing to their degradation in the bottom line. I mean, we keep hearing that the Canadian market is stabilizing, if not growing. Canopy right-sized their business. Hopefully they're selling through in those channels. I'm not looking for a massive number to come out of Canada, but I'm looking for just a stable number to come out of their Canadian operations, and then look at what they, if they signal any movement towards Canopy USA and the US. And then overall, Maryland. I am very, very looking forward to how Maryland plays into the numbers. We've got Curaleaf, Verano, GTI, TerraSend, Ascend, and Goodness Growth with 4 stores each in that market. TruLeave, the Cannabis, and then Ianthus each have 3 stores in that market. And then you have Marimed with 1 retail dispensary that's operating in that market. So those should be attributing to growth when we get these earnings reports here later this week.
A lot going on, that's for sure. Ben,
yeah,
what are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at just stability, I think, is the operative word, and just no blow-ups on, or no outlier numbers on the top lines or bottom lines of these companies. I think it's going to go mostly to what we've seen in other quarters. It's going to go mostly to trend, and you're not going to see too many surprises. Hopefully you'll see an upside surprise or two. TerraSend, for example, they pre-announced and raised a few weeks ago their guidance for the rest of this year. So in lieu of that, I think it's going to be good because, the numbers are pretty stable for, the retail operations. And as long as there's no blow-ups, I think it's going to be good for the sector.
Yeah. Chadwick, hello from Cleveland, Ohio. Thanks for logging on here today. Yeah, it's curious to see what some of these stable numbers as to what you guys are indicating that you want to see. But I think Canopy, as much as we look at a lot of these companies and a lot of big announcements going to be made this week, we still get a lot of feedback on Canopy, and see how that's going to direct. But when you look at this overall earnings, as I've said in a previous podcast, if we get some positive results in this earnings, does this not feel different this quarter than previous quarters?
I don't think anything's going to feel different. I mean, these stocks don't trade on fundamentals. We've known that for a while now. I don't really expect to see any sort of like aggressive upwards move based on these earnings. However, I mean, at least I'm speaking for myself. I mean, I take these as a barometer for the overall health of the businesses. I can let slip that the sector doesn't trade on fundamentals, knowing that there is stability to these companies. They have a decent cash position, and some metrics are improving and growing, despite it reflecting in the actual stock share price.
Yeah,
I don't think you're going to see any sort of wave or any sort of like aggressive move to the upside.
Well, I beg to differ, just because if you look at some of these companies that have been like shorted so heavily in the last few months, and they do have some positive results, like look at Ascend Wellness. And if we were to get some sort of announcement pertaining to what Dan said last week, could you not see 2 and 2 put together that we could see these companies, especially when we talked last week with Sammy as well, that in the short term, some of these stocks have been heavily invested, look that they could move quicker than others. Indeed, if we do get some sort of news later this month, again, that's all hearsay, but positive results combined with a big announcement out of Washington from the DEA, could you not see some of these stocks, positive results, have been heavily shorted to rip again?
Well,
That's completely conversation.
Yeah, that's completely different than what you led with.
Earnings is completely different than
yeah.
I'm looking at this as positive sentiment, basically one after another. If we have,
I mean, sure, if we get the DEA announcement, you're going to pour fucking jet fuel on the sector.
Yeah.
But that's a completely different statement than what you asked originally, as it relates to just earnings. Are we going to trade? Are we going to trade?
Trying to be positive.
Yeah, the stocks will go up. You got to remember, this is cannabis and retail, and it takes on the characteristics of a consumer staple. So unlike other industries that earnings and revenues can vary wildly, things are very stable in the cannabis industry. Like they know to a very, very fine degree what revenues are going to be, right? That's why this sector doesn't lend to any earnings surprises, more like in comparison to like AI or something like that, where revenues are more volatile. It's very, very stable in the sector. That's why we don't hardly see any pre-announcements either way. And that's why probably we don't move on earnings too much, because everything is usually generally in line within 3 or 4 million from the top line, right? So I don't see any surprises. That's a different conversation, though. If we get the jet fuel, could they rise? And absolutely.
Got to speculate. It's my job as a media guy. So stable is the key word, right?
Yeah.
Just for earnings, yes.
Yeah.
Earnings,
if we don't
stable,
get
very few surprises.
Yeah. If we don't get stable earnings and you start to see some degradation in these earnings reports, that's going to be cause for concern.
All signs point in that direction, though, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, they damn well better. Otherwise, in some of these major markets are going to have problems. Because I think that you're going to get aggressive numbers out of Maryland with each company, at least the big boys. So, I mean, if they're getting that incremental growth from Maryland, yet they miss numbers, that would be a very bad sign.
JB, good point. Haha. When Ben is calling you out, you know you went too far. I'm trying. I just want to give people something that they want to hear, but I appreciate the feedback. I'm put in my place, so I'll behave now. Let's shift now to Canadian operator Organigram. Ben, they announced a 124.6 Canadian million dollars follow on strategic equity investment from BTDE Investments Incorporated, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of BAT, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol BTI, which is a leading multi-category consumers goods business. So again, Ben, break this down on what this means for this company, its stakeholders, and really how this working relationship came to fruition between the two companies.
Yeah, originally BAT made an investment of $221 million in Organigram back in March of 2021. So what we see today is a follow-on investment of that. And it looks like they're going to issue close to 39 million shares at a price of $3.22 per share, which is way higher than the closing price before the announcement. So that would be bullish. The stock was up about 32% pre-market and finished near the highs for today. So it's very good. Ultimately, BAT is making another strategic investment in the company, for which Organigram is going to go out and buy other cannabis businesses because they foresee growth in the future. So this is actually a very good sign, a very healthy sign for the industry, because 124 million is not a small sum. and they're giving it to Organigram to grow their business, outside of what they do right now, to invest in other companies. So this is a bullish sign.
So when we look at invest in other companies, like, are we looking at the Canadian market, the American market, both?
This Jupiter vehicle is going to be Sunstream 2.0. I've got a feeling.
How so?
What do you mean? I mean, it's an investment vehicle, and I think their exact verbiage was to a strategic investment pool designed to expand Organigram's geographic footprint. If I had to guess, that is coming south of the border and picking up and or investing in U.S.-based cannabis companies. That's not going to be consolidating the Canadian market. BATS is coming in for a reason. Yeah. I actually didn't read this press release until just now. And someone on Twitter tweeted 12.46 million versus 124.6 million. So I didn't realize how high impact this was until about 2 minutes ago. This is a big deal.
Huge.
I think it's a big deal. And I also think it's validation for what SNDL is doing. Granted, it's much smaller in size and scale. You're going to get a lot less punch with 83 million versus the size that they went with Sunstream. But yeah, this is a huge deal for Organigram.
Company that is a huge company too. I mean, that's British American Tobacco. I mean, I don't know what their market cap is off the top of the head, but it is, 100, like,
I don't want to get
to 70 or 80 billion, I would guess, or 50 billion.
I don't want to get too speculative, but I'd be willing to bet that BATS takes this thing out. You think? Down the road. Yeah. Otherwise, why would they, at this point in the game, why would they be pouring? That's a big check.
Yeah.
Like that's a nice size check.
I haven't followed Organigram that much recently, but anytime I've heard people that have visited out to their facilities on the East Coast there have nothing but incredible things to say. So a company that got a lot of love in the early days may be coming back. Who knows?
I've always rooted for them. It's a good story.
It is a good story.
It also shows that they're not abandoning cannabis, right? And you've seen, like, to make a follow-on investment of this size is and not abandoning the company because it hasn't gone towards their expectations. Their original investment hasn't gone out as planned. Just means that they're basically doubling down the sector, and they believe in the sector long term. So
this is buy-in from Big Tobacco again.
And funny how it's happening here in November, as I like to speculate even more. I don't know anything, but again, I'll keep speculating. All right, let's move now to Ohio, where multi-state operator Air Wellness appears to be beefing up their presence within the state. And as we gear up for tomorrow's big vote, Anthony, we've spoken in the past on how this state of Ohio could be a $4 billion market for adult use cannabis, and companies like Air Wellness are obviously fully aware of this. So what exactly did this announcement today entail?
Yeah, so I mean, I like the move. They've now got one operating dispensary in Ohio as of today. They'll have 2 online by the end of the week, as per the press release. They also have an option for a third. So these 3 retail dispensaries pair with their 58,000 square foot cultivation facility in the state. I like this move, even if Ohio is a medical market as it stands today. I mean, this gives them market share, and this gives them a presence in a pretty damn good market in the United States. This adult use initiative passes, issue 2 goes off with a hitch, and they do get adult use. It's a win for Air across the board. I love seeing the move.
Yeah, this is going to be a big week, not only earnings, but with that vote tomorrow. Like, that's a big day for the state. And what are some notable names outside of Air that are in the state of Ohio?
You've got, I think you've got GTII, you've got Verano. There's a lot of the tier 1s are in Ohio for obvious reasons.
Big state, that's for sure. Ever growing, that's for sure. Ben, big day for tomorrow, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. By population, Ohio is the 6th biggest state. So it's a big market. They have several, big, large metropolises: Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland is another one. So, there's big markets there, and it is a big state if they go rec, and I expect that they will. 57% was the last public voting in favor of recreational cannabis, and I think it's going to go through.
Acreage as well. Thank you, Chadwick. And F&G Jet Fuel.
Like Body and Mind too. Don't forget Body and Mind. Small company, but they have at least
Bam's
one.
Bam's a great little. They're a great little operator.
Trip Hoffman. He is
Michael Mills and Trip. They're those are 2 good dudes.
He is a really good dude.
Trip's great.
Trip was a hedge fund manager and then applied for a grower's job at $10 an hour. on Craigslist and worked his way up. And that man knows that business inside and out, top to bottom.
Very smart gentleman.
Yeah. Speaks a
guys.
lot. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, let's switch now to the Sunshine State, Florida. The Florida Supreme Court will hear arguments from a marijuana amendment, Ben. We all know that this proposed amendment has enough signatures from Florida residents to get on the ballot in November of 2024. However, the Attorney General, Ashley Moody, is trying to keep the amendment off of it. Why?
Well, she's arguing that the language was not was misleading to voters and did not make clear that while the amendment would make recreational cannabis legal, it is still federally illegal under federal law. So she's kind of arguing kind of semantics here. But I think it's, I think it's bunk. I think most people do. The voters want it in the state. And this strikes me as very political. Ron DeSantis, the governor, is not a friend of cannabis. And I think they're just looking at, sort of technicalities to get this off the ballot. But it's good that the Florida Supreme Court is looking at it. To my understanding, they're going to make a decision anytime between when they look at it to April of next year. So from that time, we should have a decision on whether this goes rec. And if it does, multiple players can benefit from this.
Interesting. Do you believe that? Like, do you think this misled term is kind of BS?
Oh, no, that's BS. The thing is, Brady put it the best. So the reason why the adult use initiative failed the last time around is they tried to sneak in home grow. Florida, from a ballot amendment perspective, it's got to be single issue. They've stripped it down. It's single issue. It's just adult use cannabis in the state of Florida. I think it's going to get out of the Supreme Court and it's going to find its way on the ballot.
You do?
Yeah.
What could go wrong? Many things, I would think.
It could get shot down and not go on the ballot. That's exactly what could go wrong. But I mean, as far as the setup and what everything is going with the momentum, what Kim's done in the state, the grassroots effort for adult use cannabis, I mean, all the cards and checks and balances have been put in place for it to find its way on the ballot in November 2024.
You could say that there's 7 justices of the 9 are conservative, but even then, most conservatives probably support the measure, probably over 50%. So that's not even really a net negative, or perhaps it isn't a net negative in today's times. Maybe 10 years ago it would have been, but I don't know. Maybe Anthony has an opinion on that.
No, I mean, it's sad. It's sad where we are, but I mean, the people that I know, and I know a decent amount of people up in Tallahassee as I went to school there. The reason why they don't want adult use cannabis on the ballot is because they don't want to increase the number of Democrat voters coming to the polls. That is the main objection that I am hearing from behind closed doors on the adult use initiative. They simply don't want to increase the Democratic turnout and even the younger turnout at the polls for the elections, which to me it's ludicrous.
When isn't cannabis a political football? It doesn't matter what it is on the federal level. It always seems to play like an ancillary issue that, like, it's big, like Charlie Brown when they pull the football from Lucy, or when Lucy pulls the football from Charlie Brown when he goes to kick it. It seems like this issue, like this sort of thing.
I mean, Chuckles is doing it. It's doing it to us again. Yeah, he's now saying that he needs to jam in his social justice stuff in order to get this thing, which I'm all for. Let's get the criminal reform. Let's get all that stuff in, but don't jam it into safe. Incremental is going to work. If he talks everybody into passing safer, criminal reform is going to be a cakewalk that they'll walk straight through with it. Yeah. But let's not try to get everything done at once.
Well, even Brady Cobb was saying going as far as saying Iowa might have something to do with this as well, Ron DeSantis's campaign.
Yeah, but DeSantis knows that he's got. I mean, maybe he hasn't come to this conclusion himself yet, but he doesn't have a shot.
Zero chance
as far as the GOP goes. Every media outlet, every political pundit, it's Biden against Trump, which I couldn't.
If they don't lock up Trump. If they don't ban him from running, like
they're going to have to legally ban that man from running for president.
But you know what they're doing in Colorado? States like Colorado are trying to get him off the ballot in the state because of his legal issues, which is, technicalities or whatever you want to call it, to try to get him off. So who knows? So if Trump does not run, do you think DeSantis has a chance? He doesn't if Trump runs.
If Trump does not run, yes, absolutely. If Donald Trump is locked
disqualified-
up, if Donald Trump is locked up behind bars and not physically or legally able to run for president, DeSantis could find himself being that guy.
Yeah, Chris Christie was very vocal over the weekend too, saying timeline-wise, understand the political system, that this guy will be convicted by March, April. Obviously, looking for some
Yeah,
attention.
but have you seen? I don't want to get political here, but you see what's
Why
going
not?
on in New York. You see what's going on in New York on the case. They literally had Don Jr., Eric Trump, and Donald that they were testifying as per the reason why they were in court. They inflated the value of their business. If Donald Trump and his sons are on trial for doing that, then they need to march every VC, private equity firm, whatever, into court, because that's common practice.
Everybody,
Granted, not everybody
will.
does it on their tax returns, but people do inflate the value of their businesses and their assets to suit them in certain scenarios.
Does this mean
That's
I'm going to get charged? Because I have a value of $50 million for this company, no?
Yeah, potentially. Potentially. But yeah, I mean, it's a dog and pony show. But yes, if Trump is locked up or he's not actually able to run, DeSantis has a very good chance of being that guy.
Huh. Does Donald Trump run for presidency? Not run, but will he be able to run for presidency? A year from now, is he on the ballot?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Hard to say. Only because, like I said, Colorado is trying to get him off the ballot in the state. Who knows what states could initiate to try to get him off the ballot in their jurisdiction. Should he be on the ballot? Of course he should be. He's a former, but there's a lot of politics. Like it's pretty obvious that they're trying to do everything to get him off because he's going to win. And he's like 20 points up on Biden in national polls. He's like, I don't think anybody's within, not even close within in his own, like in the Republican Party. Like he's like the clear favorite.
Not even the same hemisphere.
He's in his own stratosphere. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's the religion of Donald.
It's just a banana republic, locking up your candidate or trying to prevent him from run. They've done the same thing in Brazil and in other countries. Not to get political, sorry, we're getting a little bit too in the weeds, but they did the same thing in Brazil too with Bolsonaro and Lula and all that. That's sort of the way things are kind of working right now.
Marcus Smith, good to see you, my friend. Trump inflating value by adding 20,000 plus square feet to his penthouse in Manhattan. That's pretty much it.
It's creative. It's creative financing. I don't agree with it, but do I think he should be brought up on charges by the New York AG? No.
Can you imagine if Trump was doing the same things as Nancy Pelosi? Like, please, come on.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Right, he is. But
I'd be willing to bet you that Don Jr., Kushner, they were all doing the same shit that Hunter Biden's doing. Hunter Biden's just an idiot.
Yeah,
he just gets caught for everything.
Yeah. All right, this is the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Benjamin A. Smith and Anthony Varrell. Gents, before we wrap up this first segment into the wire, outlining all the big headlines for today in cannabis, psychedelics, and crypto, I will put you on the spot. If you had to predict does Ohio get approved tomorrow? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. It does.
Okay.
Do I think it gets challenged on the back end? Possibly. But I do think the Ohio issue too does pass.
Okay. And secondly, if you had to predict one or two companies that will be the winners of this quarter's earnings season, who are they?
I would say GTI. They always seem to be a winner. And GTI and Curaleaf.
GTI and Curaleaf.
I'm actually going to go Verano and TRUL.
Verano and TRUL.
Yeah.
Okay, write that down.
I think they both surprise.
Would you have been GTI and Curaleaf?
GTI and Curaleaf, but I think they're all going to meet pretty much in line. Yeah. Like I said, pretty stable earnings in this industry.
By the way, you saw Germany. Apparently, they're actually going to put the recreational cannabis legal framework up to a vote by year's end.
Oh, that's interesting.
Via marijuana moment. So, I mean, if that does happen, that bodes well for Curaleaf.
That's for sure. All right, gents, that wraps up the first segment into the wire. Let's now switch to segment 2, where we look at daily movers as to who we're watching and why. Anthony, we begin once again with cannabis and arguably the most followed stock in the sector, TRUL, who quietly has been on a little bit of a tear in the last week or so. So why are you watching this besides the obvious?
Yeah, I mean, they're up 24% last week, which should have people on notice. I mean, someone's obviously in the market buying that's not MSOS. That's good as far as I'm concerned, as far as confirming a trend. I mean, it's looking nice in that little run. I like that they've got Maryland. They've got other markets that are coming online. I think they're finally putting Harvest behind them. It's setting up here to be good. And I mean, we do get the DEA announcement. Everyone knows what happens to TRUL if 280E drops. They overnight become a cash producing cow. I'd be willing to bet that not be willing to bet, but this is what we're going to be one. This is one of my tier 1 names that I'd be going into on the back end of that.
And that's a big fat grass fed cow. Like that'll be a behemoth overnight.
Watch. I mean, it's not materializing yet, but I guarantee you Kim does in Georgia what she did in Florida.
Yeah, I know.
She's going to do it, and she's going to do it quietly, and she's going to do it consistently. And once that machine is built, it's going to start doing what it's done in Florida.
It's from a logistics standpoint, no competition there right now, and it's right next door to Florida. I could see them scaling up, and why not? It's tough to obviously be across the country, but if you're next door, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, John Verville, he's predicting SNDL to be the big winner of the earnings season. We shall see. We can always get an SNDL mention in each podcast. That is a trend that never goes away. Okay.
It's amazing what following this company has for.
I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know how, but they've got. It's like Trump. It's like SNDL is a religion.
Oh, shit.
They've got it's good. I mean, it's good because if I'm looking at a stock and they've got fanatical retail shareholders, usually bodes well for the stock. And I mean, from a fundamental perspective, I mean, SNDL is a pretty interesting company. They're making all the right moves.
3 guarantees in life, death, taxes, and somebody commenting with SNDL on this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Hope Zach and the team is watching this. That's for sure. All right. Next up, Ben, we're talking Cresco Labs, who, as much as we're talking about this positive sentiment in this industry right now, it's testing all-time lows. Why?
That is a very good question. I don't know. I'm watching it going into earnings season because which they report November 15th. Possible bounce play. It hasn't been really a beneficiary of this little mini bounce off the lows and MSOs. It's floating about 14 cents above the all-time low, which was around $1 a few weeks back before the HHS move. So I don't know the inside baseball on why this isn't responding, but this has been a laggard. And, I don't understand why. Perhaps it could be, their earnings are not as robust as other MSOs. Like, for example, on their last release, they produced a 9% sequential decrease year over year decrease in revenues. And I know in some of the markets that they've been a challenge in some of the markets. So maybe their earnings quality is why they're lagging a little bit. But if they get solid earnings, and it's around the lows, I'm going to be testing to see perhaps it's a decent entry for a short-term play.
Does this surprise you, Anthony? Like when you look at Cresco, what was it, year, 2 years, maybe 3 years ago?
It does.
Them or GTI were always in that same sentence as the best company in the U.S.
So it does surprise me. I mean, I think that they might get marks off for their emphasis on wholesale. And I mean, we know it's what the wholesale markets have looked like in a lot of the markets that they're in. That being said, I mean, I do think that they probably surprised this quarter as far as stabilizing and starting to show a little bit more growth. I don't understand why it's in this trend. But I mean, they surprised me last quarter. I was talking shit about Cresco before the earnings report came out, and then they put out a pretty good quarter. I ate those words, kind of owned up to it and moved on. I'm not going to fade them in front of this one.
What needs to happen for the flip or the switch to flip in the other direction?
Well, you probably need a big uptick in wholesale prices, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
In any of these markets, but yeah, I mean they're in all the good markets. I mean it's a solid company. Price action says otherwise, though. That's just my opinion.
All right. Next up, Ben. Obviously, some news that's going to be coming down this week with regards to Florida, and more news to see what direction this rec ballot will go. And because of that, you're watching Consortium. Why?
Yeah, that's a stock we've talked about a couple weeks ago on this program, and so I'm just sort of revisiting this. It's a very liquid stock, so be forewarned up front. It's not for the faint of heart. If you're in, you're in. Like it's not something that you can just trade out of very easily.
Yeah.
But as we've mentioned before, 32 dispensaries in Florida and cash flow positive. Its main interest is in the Florida. My main interest is on the Florida rec ballot decision whenever that comes, whether it's next week, whether it's before April, start of April 2024. It's because unlike other MSOs, because of the size of this company, it is very highly leveraged, probably the most leveraged to that ballot play. Because if Florida goes on the rec ballot, there's some MSOs that are probably going to look to acquire the assets, or maybe even some of the ones that are already there looking to add size if they're below the cap in that state, because then Florida instantaneously becomes the best market in the United States, bar none, even better in California.
Can you guys break down, just so everybody understands, what we're looking at this week in Florida, what's going to be decided, or at least what's going to be talked about, and then what we're looking as far as a timeline? You said between now and next spring is when we will determine whether or not this will be on the ballot. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, perhaps Anthony has more of the inside baseball on the exact timelines. I know they're listening to arguments next week with Ashley Moody, but the decision has to be out by, I think it's somewhere in early, like April 3rd or something in 2024. That's when the deadline for the decision is due out. In between that time frame, where
any time between now and then.
Yeah. So nothing's being decided. The Florida Supreme Court is listening to the arguments. I mean, you're going to be able to. The writing will be on the wall probably after the Supreme Court actually hears the arguments, judging by listening to both sides. I know some people that are actually going to be at that hearing, so I'll be knowing in firsthand what goes on right after the fact. So we'll cover that after on the 8th. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna. I think it's gonna pass and get on the ballot and go up for vote in November 2024.
Anthony, do you know how long?
I'm a shareholder. I have a position in Consortium. It's kind of like my call option on Florida. As they've got 30 plus doors, they produce healthy top line, healthy bottom line, but they are highly levered as far as debt goes as well. So I mean, it's not something that you should deploy capital into unless you really, really understand their business, and it's a bet on 280E going away as well as adult use in Florida hitting. If not, then they might be a zero.
Intertwined with GTI too, right?
Yeah, GTI owns a portion of the debt.
So, Anthony, do you know how long the Florida Supreme Court generally deliberates after they hear decision? I know you probably don't have those stats in front of you.
I don't. If I had to guess, the hearing is going to be on the 8th, judging by what politicians usually treat November and December with Thanksgiving and the holidays, there's probably not going to be a decision until January, February, if I had to guess.
November 8th, 9 a.m. is the oral argument. Thanks for bringing that up. Marcus Smith also pointed, when will we know the Ohio ballot, tomorrow night or Wednesday? Hopefully tomorrow night, but the way a lot of these elections are going lately, it usually overflows into the next morning. So
should happen tomorrow night. Usually, like on other previous ballots, they usually know what the results are either that night or the next morning. So we should know pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay, last up, we talked a lot about this last week. SBF, that trial, he's basically convicted on all fraud charges. This could be the year of crypto, the end of this year in 2024. Anthony, you're looking at Ethereum. Why?
Yeah, I mean, Ethereum's lagged the rally. It's up 17% in the past month, and on a relative basis, Bitcoin's up 27%, Sol's up 75%, Solana is up 75%, XRP or Ripple's up 37%, and Cardano's up 35%. So I mean, it's kind of lagged its peers. It looks like it's coiling up here. It cracked 1900 today. Ethereum's kind of the gold standard when it comes to altcoins. I mean, it is the altcoin that's out there. It's the one that's got the most dApps built on it. It's got the most users. It's got the most transactions that are occurring on it. That being said, I feel like people are starting to wake up and starting to see things like Solana, Cardano, and the other L2s where gas fees are mitigated down to essentially nothing. The average gas fee for a transaction on Ethereum was $4.10 over the last 30-day period. That
in comparison to what, say, 6 months ago,
pennies on other networks. But that being said, I mean, I think Ethereum probably does make a move here in the short to medium term. I'm looking at it again seriously, especially now that I kind of dug in and saw that it lagged all of its peers on a relative basis. If Bitcoin flies, which we're about one announcement away from Bitcoin hitting some other candles, Ethereum's probably going to roll. Ethereum's probably going to rip in parity with it.
I'm curious to see, like, no one can predict the future, but where is this industry 12 months from now? If the SEC does approve, like, say, BlackRock's ETF, like, how high do you think is the potential in the next year for Bitcoin to hit if a lot of this stuff does come to fruition?
If the ETFs are approved and we do see the capital inflows that people are suspecting coming in, I mean, this is no way in shape or form a price target, but I mean, it's math.
Yeah.
Bitcoin would probably be over $100,000 each.
Wow.
That being said, if Bitcoin's over 100K, Ethereum's probably going to be somewhere in the 7 to 10K range. I mean, they're going to move in parity with one another. There's GBTC, 100%. There's ETHE. The problem is Ethereum has a lot of regulatory uncertainty. Unlike Bitcoin, which is more seen as a store of value. I mean, there's obviously been the argument at the SEC that Ethereum is a security. Gensler came out and said Ethereum is not a security, as they lost in court. However, you've got the PayPal. PayPal has PYUSD, which is a PayPal stablecoin. That in itself was challenged by the SEC via a letter. So that gives some ambiguity into the regulatory conversation around Ethereum, which is one of the reasons I think it's actually lagged. Is people are just waiting for this regulatory uncertainty to kind of have a come to an end.
And the timeline on that would be what, next year?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have zero idea when that's going to happen. But I think if you see spot Bitcoin ETFs get approved, it's going to accelerate the conversation for a spot Ethereum ETF being approved, and then getting some sort of regulatory guidance and clarity around Ethereum as a whole as it relates to the SEC.
I've seen a lot of talk of Cathie Wood lately about how she's saying Bitcoin can fix inflation. Do you agree with that? And if so, why do you think she says that?
I don't think Bitcoin can fix inflation.
Why is that?
Because it's not correlated to the US dollar. Like, we're not going to start buying things in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. Yeah. I mean, I still buy silver and gold just as a hedge against the US dollar and a hedge against inflation. Bitcoin I see as the same store of value and the same method of doing that as part of your wealth management strategy.
She might be right if this was the current dollar. Like, if everybody was using Bitcoin, everybody was using Bitcoin and it was on the standard, because it's set at 21 million or whatever that number is when they're all mined, then theoretically, sort of like the gold standard where you can only produce a certain amount.
It'd be the Bitcoin standard.
The problem is nobody uses Bitcoin, or very few people use Bitcoins in transaction in everyday goods and services.
Because you can't. Imagine if you were at Walmart right now and you went to go use Apple Pay, and instead of Apple Pay using fiat, it used Bitcoin. Yeah. Yes, the transaction would trigger. You might be sitting there for 4 minutes waiting for the transaction to validate. Like it doesn't work. Granted, Lightning is solving that, and they are building some L2s or layer 2s on Bitcoin. But I really do firmly believe that Bitcoin stays as a store of value, as a solid store of value, and what it's used for now. It doesn't get used in a transactional sense. And you see Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, not so much Polygon now, but you see other L2s and Ethereum solutions scale, XRP, to be used for settlement in financial transactions.
Anthony, let me ask you this, since we're talking about it, but why is Bitcoin valued at 35,000 US or whatever when it actually doesn't have much value in terms of facilitating transactions? What is it kind of like gold, where it's just like it doesn't really do anything, and yet
supply and demand?
Correct. Supply and demand. It's simple supply and demand. Bitcoin is it's air. I mean, it's literally vapor when it comes down to it, but it's digital. It's there. You can own it, and you can solely own it. You can be custody of it. You can take custody of it. And I mean, it's just supply and demand.
But you can take custody of like a million other things. Like, why? Like, it just seems like something that's valued with no utility, or very
There's
little
zero utility.
that's only valued because
As
people
far as I'm,
are valuing it at that price.
as far as I'm concerned, Bitcoin has pretty much zero utility.
Yeah.
So why isn't something else
But
valued? Like,
gold is
why isn't
gold is
Ethereum?
zero.
Why isn't
But
it
gold
flipping
is
the
zero.
tables with Ethereum where it does have utility?
So I mean, you make the argument for this. This is a 10-ounce silver bar. This is worth roughly $250. What's the value of this? If I went to Best Buy, right?
Value. It has
But if I went
industrial
to
value, though.
Correct. But if I went to Best Buy right now and tried to pay with this, I
But
couldn't.
at least it has some industrial value. Bitcoin literally has.
So yes, bad example, but I'm talking about as an exchange of value.
Take
But
my
yes,
bar. My horse and carriage is outside waiting.
correct. They
Yeah.
look at me like I was nuts.
It just
Yeah.
seems like Ethereum should be. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but it seems like Ethereum should be valued. Like it actually has utility, right? Like
You're completely correct in that assumption.
Yeah.
You're absolutely completely correct in that assumption. Ethereum has use cases. Ethereum has transactional value. Ethereum has utility.
Yeah.
Ethereum and XRP are the equivalent to the SWIFT system that we use in the fiat world right now. As far as being that base layer and that settlement layer for transactions, that is absolutely unequivocally what they probably will be in the future.
Takes time, which everybody hates to hear in this day and age. Mas Alamode writes, would Bitcoin come down if the market sells off? Well, I would think it would.
I'm going to guess it goes up.
If the market has a sell-off, really?
I would guess it goes. In the world that we're living in right now, with the amount of inflationary pressures and the amount of uncertainty around the US dollar and just the weakness in the fiat system, if there's like a 2008 sell-off in the market,
you think Bitcoin
I would
rips?
bet that capital finds its way to Bitcoin.
And that would be nice to have, because as we've seen in other crises, Bitcoin has not responded. It is sold off. So if it actually increases during the next financial crisis, then we know it is officially arrived, because it is usually not held up in a store value in those circumstances.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Larry Fink called it a flight to safety.
It hasn't been in the past. He could be right, but in the past, it hasn't.
It hasn't in the past, but in the past, he was also calling it magic fairy dust.
That's true.
Like he was not Stanley Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones. Like these guys are calling it a flight to safety and a validated asset. They were calling it like everything in the kitchen sink that you could think of to discredit it a couple of years back. Jamie Dimon's come around.
Why'd they flip?
Why? Because they realized that it's actually useful and they actually can make money on it. This crypto just happened to be a trend that retail front ran all of the institutional guys for once.
Which is rare, right? Usually it's the other way around.
I mean, I couldn't name you another scenario where they did.
Aesthetic Exploration writes, if it's simple supply and demand, what happens if the demand softens or when something better comes along?
Price goes down. I mean, that's simple. If the demand softens or people start selling their Bitcoin and there's no buy side, there's no buy side demand, the price will go down drastically.
Yeah.
But with
dramatically. But the good thing, the good thing about crypto is there's kind of nuance.
We got about 2 minutes left, guys, by the way.
Yeah. The good thing about crypto is there's nuance. So if you start to see inflows on the blockchain, which you can see because since it's a public ledger, you can see, like, if a fund loads up 10,000 Bitcoin out of cold storage and puts them into circulation, chances are they're going to sell.
Yeah.
If a fund loosens up $2 billion in Tether out of their reserves, chances are they're going to start buying assets across the board. Mm-hmm. You can start to forecast what's going to go on in these ecosystems with seeing the capital inflows and outflows on chain, which you can see readily available on like Dune Analytics, which is a good part about blockchain.
You know your stuff. I'm not going to lie. I hope you guys found that informative. This wraps up the daily movers of the day, who we're watching and why, here at the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. Good show, gents. We got a big week coming up. Obviously, earnings, as we said off the top. Some notable names again: GTII, TRUL, TSND, Ascend, Verano, Canopy Growth, among others. So a big week to say the least. We got a big Ohio vote coming out tomorrow, so we should have an answer hopefully by tomorrow night, at the very latest Wednesday morning, to answer your question, Marcus Smith. As well, Organigram secures $124 million. Air Wellness beefens up their presence in Ohio. And finally, we're watching TruLeaf, Consortium, Cresco Labs flirting all-time lows, and finally Ethereum, as you just alluded us and gave us a good little tutorial as to what this industry needs to do, not only today but moving forward. Gents, welcome back. Big week coming up. We'll check back in with you midweek. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Talk soon.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
everybody for watching.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.